Dharm is not going to censor anybody. Love you, like you, 90% of the time you're dead on. Notice I said 90. You speak what's on your mind. And sometimes you might even go to like a personal level, and you were pissed, and you were not just pissed because they tried to control you, but they tried to control the event, and they hurt Amy and Dharm.
Welcome to the year-end wrap-up of Straight Fire VR. Today's episode, we go over who's on Santa's naughty and nice list. Dharm 2024 ends the year with a bang, with an explosive conference out in Destin, Florida. Our returning industry expert is the co-founder and chief revenue at Shortcuts, Michelle Marquis. Reading off the smuggled out Santa's list is the regional director of business development at V-Trips and the co-host of Straight Fire VR, Miriam Ramsey. Personally handing out coal to those on the naughty list is our host, as well as the founder and CEO at V-Trips, Steve Milo. Steve, tell us what's under the tree today.
Hey, thank you, Heather. Welcome to a special season-ending edition of Straight Fire VR. I'm proud to have one of our favorite guests, Michelle Marquis, and of course our co-host, Miriam Ramsey. And it's exciting times. We just got the press release, Michelle, that Hostaway raised over $300 million and a valuation of $925 million. So you want to talk about this, Michelle? Because this is incredible news.
It is incredible news. And, when you look at the summary of it, as far as how many units they say they have, and, the knowledge that I have because of knowing the industry and the sizes of the different PMSs, they have 100,000 units under management in 90 countries. And so I immediately, typically software companies go, let's go after the big guys. Let's go after the big guys. And these guys have clearly done the opposite. They've gone after smaller size PMs and been able to scale it to 100,000 units, which is, where were they at just when they did that first round? I don't know, what was that, about a year and a half ago?
Oh, they were much smaller then. So they've been on a tear. And it's interesting because they've kind of been a little bit under the radar because most of the headlines and press goes to Guesty, the big company out of Tel Aviv, and we'll talk about them later. But this is pretty impressive. I mean, Guesty has indicated they have over $1 billion valuation, and now Hostaway is clearly right there. And it just shows the massive amount of money in the short-term rental space.
Well, it also, like when you think about the growth, it's not like there's a Salesforce type size market, right? There is a certain TAM for it. And, when you see somebody getting evaluations like that, you think, is there room for more? What do you think?
Well, I think the window, so to speak, has started to open. There's a lot of reasons for it. Certainly, one of the things that we're hearing with a new administration coming in is that they're going to reduce some of the regulations and open up money and make it easier for large transactions, particularly from international players. This is good news because there's been a lot of money on the sideline. And this space, short-term rentals, is one of the few spaces where everyone is still bullish. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk also later this episode about AI, but this is not going to be an AI episode. There's plenty of those out there if you want to listen to this. This is really about the industry. And the thing about short-term rentals, which is significant, is it's one of these industries of the 21st century that has a huge growth potential. And that's because the younger generation likes vacation rentals over traditional hotels, and the younger generation values leisure and travel over even having material possessions. So what people want to do is travel, and where they want to stay are vacation rentals. And, this is just further validation of the money and what people view as one of the biggest sectors of the 21st century. Miriam, have you ever met Marcus?
I have. So listen, I think they've done it correctly. I think they, like Michelle said, punching it out with the smaller guys initially, they have knocked the kinks and bells and whistles out. I think when you try to grow, with the larger PMs, there's so much more to entail with it. But starting at the with the smaller groups, growing that way. Look, I've worked a little bit with their software with some other property management companies. It works well. I mean, that's the biggest thing, starting with what you know and continuously that growth, much a great idea of what they're doing and how they're executing it.
So,
Interesting.
Michelle, isn't it interesting because you and I are both have been in the industry long enough to remember that the way the property management systems used to operate is they went after the larger customers.
Mhm.
And even you were just more recently with Travel Net Solutions, TNS, or as some people call them, Track, and that was their strategy. They went after the large enterprise companies and did quite well, and then eventually sold to Blue Star. But Hostaway and Guesty did it the opposite way. They went after basically host and superhost and have built this ecosystem, and there appears to be more monetization opportunities. My understanding is from people at Guesty is some of their most lucrative services are among payments and ancillary fees that they are able to charge the host or the guest. It's pretty incredible.
And I think that, well, we've seen Inhabit and Track monetize the credit card processing. I don't know if Hostfully is monetizing distribution yet, but everybody else is, so it seems like they would at some point, right? So, but here's the other thing I read in the press release, because I don't know much about their software. And that is that they've developed more of a platform. So it is okay, and they encourage you to work with that partner and work with that partner, and not necessarily are trying to be the all-in-one. And let's like talk a little bit about that. And is that the right way to go? And then how do you then make sure that your product, we're going to talk about AI, starts to lean in that direction like Boom has?
Well, we're going to get to AI, but it is interesting, right? So clearly, what we've seen, and we're going to talk also about Guesty, is you've got two companies, Guesty and Hostaway, who appear that they may be heading towards potentially an IPO. So it is interesting. Vareed Schwartz over at Guesty even admitted it at a discussion of private equity and fundraising, that IPO was something that Guesty was circling, and they were actually going to be opening up a New York City office to start to work on an IPO. So pretty incredible news for the industry. Obviously, this level of money coming in is a plus, and it's even a bigger plus that it's not just Airbnb, which has kind of been a company which hasn't always played nice with people in the short-term rental industry. I mean, Guesty and Hostaway have been really good partners to work with, and so this is really great news all along. Miriam, anything else you want to say about this level of money coming in the industry?
I love it. I think it's good. I think it's going to be good for the year that we all have had, and some other groups seeing that coming in at the end of this year. I think 25 and 26, you're going to see the same exact things in companies that have done it correctly. I think the groups that continuously perform are going to see more money coming in, and I think it's going to be good for the industry across the board.
Well, a couple of things. Don't we all wish we were in that stream someplace? Let's first of all say that. But also, like, when you think about international, sounds like Hostaway has, in 90 countries, but every other PMS has dabbled in other countries. No, there's not a major player that has gone into Europe from the United States, and Guesty's in Tel Aviv, but majority of their business is the United States. So there's huge growth opportunities for everybody that's in the US market currently. And then I also wonder how quickly software is going to develop with AI, and is that good for the older platforms? Or are they going to have to retool a bunch of things and it's going to take them longer to get there than some of the newer platforms? What do you guys
I
think?
think they're going to retool. They're going to have to. They're not ready for it, and I think the new innovation of a lot of these companies, Augusty, Hostaway, they're going to kill it and be rock stars. The other stuff definitely going to struggle.
Well,
Wrong,
I,
we should
I
say.
I will counter a little this. I think what separated the true enterprise companies has been the accounting system, and that is very, very difficult. And I don't think AI is going to solve that. The only thing that really solves accounting is a lot of use. You have to have a lot of users use the system and provide feedback. It took Track, TNS 5+ years to get their trust accounting right. And there were companies like Southern Vacation Rentals who were early on and others, and they weren't ready for North Carolina, I think, until probably 2021, because they have the strictest trust accounting rules in the country. But the Guesties of the world and the Hostaways have been dealing mostly with European companies, and those European companies have separate accounting systems. So they're not having to have an all-inclusive trust accounting system. So I think it will be interesting because there clearly are a lot of hosts and superhosts if you just take a look at the listings on Airbnb, and much more so than property managers. So but then again, we know that Guesty is doing everything they can to try to also pick up property managers, and that's been a major focus. But let's talk a little bit about DARM. Michelle, I know we had a lot of things to talk about. We're definitely going to talk about AI. We're definitely going to talk about Guesty being there, and some of the comments Jason Sprinkle and Melanie Brown indicated. We also need to talk about some of the news, including Inhabit IQ, and what happened with their investment by Blackstone and Will Guidara. And all of this stuff should have been headline news, but instead the headline news was about VRBO. So you want to tell us what happened with VRBO? Because that's all that people were talking about at the conference.
That was super unfortunate. And I heard a saying once that said you can be part of the conversation or you can be the conversation. And I think that's what happened. So I guess with everything, the cat being out of the bag and pretty much, everybody talking about it, here's what happened. There was a misunderstanding. I will be generous there. There's a misunderstanding on their sponsorship and what had been agreed upon with regards to having a certain speaker speaking at all. And after they committed to sponsoring for VRBO, I got an email asking if you, Steve Milo, were speaking at the conference, and that they would want to know if you were. And I said, well, as of right now, no. And if I'm not responsible for that area of the content, but if I hear anything, I'll let you know. I believe you only were asked to speak like a week or 10 days out. So, I mean, I really wasn't in the know, nor did it wasn't part of what I assumed was an agreement. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't have made that agreement because DARM is not going to censor anybody that, especially someone, Steve, like what, love you, like you, 90% of the time you're dead on. Notice I said 90. So anyways, at 11:30 at night, we got an email that basically said, we want to pull out of our sponsorships, both for Expedia, which we never discussed, whether there was, you never even came up. And so, we emailed back and forth, and by the time the morning came along, we had to go in and pull their booths down and, in front of everybody, rearrange the meeting space, tell people that had badges that they weren't allowed in. And, it was clear to everybody that something was going on. And it's just unfortunate because I believe that you've had problems with Verbo, but you were on the mend with a bunch of the problems you had and were heading in a good direction and felt good about things. And I think they met with your executive team the week before. And so what ended up happening is, in your fireside chat, what was talked about? What was like the main scuttlebutt? So what they
Yes.
to happen ended up being exactly what happened. And you speak what's on your mind. And sometimes you might even go to like a personal level. And you were pissed. And you were not just pissed because they tried to control you, but they tried to control the event and they hurt Amy and Darm.
Right. So, yeah. So I ended up having a fireside chat with Amy High Note. So, kind of behind the scenes, what's going on is Beatrips is in a situation where we don't pay to speak. I mean, some vendors sponsor and they get some speaking gigs, and then other people are invited to speak because Amy finds them interesting or compelling content. And I wasn't expected to speak because there was another person from another company she wanted, and they canceled last minute. So then she texted me and said, "Would you speak?" And I'm like, "Okay, fine. I have no problem
You
speaking."
were the second. You were the second fiddle. Don't feel bad, Steve. You're still the second.
So anyhow, so this came up, and yeah. So what happened was, and then I was on a couple other panels that were lesser panels, but either way, what happened was, for whatever reason, VRBO decided that they wanted to die on this hill, that that Amy needed to cancel my session and not allow me to speak, which is preposterous. Amy is a big proponent of the First Amendment. She totally is against the censorship stuff that kind of gripped the industry last year, the cancel culture. She's totally against this. I mean, she's a journalist. VR Mintel started as a news site. Um, Darm was about sharing information. She wants a lot of different information shared. And the thing that she wants to stop and to fight is this cancel and censorship nonsense that seemed to grip some of various industries. She's totally against it. So that really struck a nerve with her. And we didn't talk. I mean, all this stuff was going on. She sent me a text or two, but I had no idea until I sat down at the fireside chat what she wanted to talk about. And of course, one of the things she wanted to talk about was VRBO and their behavior. And they weren't even going to be talked about. There were so many other things she wanted to talk about. It was only 25 minutes. Verbo was not even on the list. So they became part of this. And beyond that, in front of hundreds and hundreds of people at that conference, all people were talking about was what happened with Verbo. Why did Verbo leave? Why did Expedia leave? Why was Expedia no longer there? And it was embarrassing. I mean, it's embarrassing, some of the things I heard. I heard they were walked out, they were escorted out, and the staff was shocked, and I guess they would be shocked. I mean, these people probably they flew in all their vendor stuff and their booths, and then all of a sudden they're sent back. And it doesn't seem really logical. It just seems like probably one person with a huge ego decided to do a power play, and it backfired because Amy wasn't having any of it. She just is not going to let any vendor set a precedent that they can control or cancel or censor content at a darn session. So I think from Amy's standpoint, Verbo crossed the line, and maybe they thought she would back down, and she didn't. So, but Miriam, you heard bits and pieces of this. Are you surprised?
To be fair, a little bit, because I thought our last couple of podcasts, we've actually talked very good about them and seen the growth that's changing, and see what's coming down the pipe in 25, 26. Listen, people get in their feelings. Unfortunately, we want to see who's got the bigger, we're going to say candy cane, because on our Christmas show. And we're trying to figure out what is happening. Who's the bigger tool at each company? Let's go in and have that conversation. Look, them pulling their staff, I get them not wanting to maybe have a conversation with you, but letting their staff get there and jerking them out and all the other things, look, it's petty. It's 2025. Let's go ahead and say, let's grow up and be adults and have adult conversations one-on-one with people, and quit being little assholes that run around and make bigger scenes out of things, because this did not help anyone at Darm. And then it made side off conversations kind of focus on them instead of what everyone was there for.
Yeah. And I actually had property managers that were disappointed because they wanted to meet specifically with the Verbo team that was there or the Escapia team that was there. So I had people go, that just hurt the industry. That just hurt, you know, and I had a session that also meant I had a panel on the main stage with Verbo, Booking.com, and Airbnb, and it also meant that they weren't on that too. So I was like, you know, scrambling to get that all taken care of, which worked out just fine. Frankly, it allowed us to be a little bit more honest on a few things. But yeah, it was unfortunate. And you know, what I'd love to do is Steve, we need to have a meeting with you, Tim, and maybe John Suzuki. Yeah, he's the moderator, right? Get you guys in a room, make nice. What do you think?
Well, I love having a conversation with Tim Rizzolio. I'm not sure John Suzuki would be the best moderator. I'd love to have Amy Hinote be the moderator. So I think one of the things Amy Hinote was most disappointed by was that Verbo didn't want her asking Tim Rizzolio questions, which I just
Yeah.
thought was super rude considering it's her conference. I mean, how can you say, "Hey, I want to do a fireside chat in front of the entire group at Darm," and then pick and choose which moderator because you think a moderator is going to be softer or ask less direct questions? I mean, to me, Verbo has completely misplayed this. This is a crisis management example. This reminds me of some of the stuff they pulled in during when John Kim was CEO of Verbo. And all of this created a lot of ill will. And what has that ill will done? It's caused property managers to start to look for other options and other distribution plays, including Airbnb, including Booking.com. None of this has been in the best interest of Verbo. It certainly was something that clearly they were aware of because they've been working pretty hard. And I have talked about in previous podcasts, the more recent ones, that they've made a concerted effort to try to be more supplier friendly again. So this really backfired. It was a self-inflicted wound. I'm surprised that they haven't reached out to Amy and kind of tried to figure out how to make amends. Maybe they will at the beginning of the new year. Who knows? Right now, they seemingly are huddled away and hoping this blows over. But this is the type of stuff that it just goes like on and on the rumor side. It's a
Yeah.
bad look. But let's talk about the good news here. The good news was because Tim Rizzolio wasn't available for the fireside chat, Amy had Verita Schwartz, the COO of Guesty. I thought she was impressive. What did you think?
Super impressive. And I've gotten to know her a little bit from how she runs her company and what her employees think of her because my daughter works at Guesty. And between that and my personal, as I've gotten to know her, smart, level-headed, committed. You know, I think of course I was impressed with her because I am every time she speaks.
Miriam, what do you think of Reed?
Listen, I'm very impressed. I mean, big to piggyback off of Michelle, very level headed. Like you can tell she's very direct, very to the point. She doesn't have she has the no bullshit face with just her persona, her surroundings. Listen, very impressive. I think Gusty is going to be one of the top performers for the next few years. But look, they have a good group of surrounding with that group. I think she has done very well with hiring. I think that she has surrounded her team and made good decisions on that. But no, very impressed with her.
Well, you know, Vereed is really running day to day at Guesty, which is probably approaching 1,000 people at this point, if not over that. And obviously, she revealed they're trying to do a public offering, which would put them either on the NASDAQ probably or the New York Stock Exchange in the U.S. market. So, you know, one of the things I know that's important to Amy is high profile women in the vacation rental industry. And she's certainly an example because, and she's even been involved on the advocacy side. I mean, she was with the advocacy fund for a couple of years. So she's been a tremendous force for the industry. And, you know, obviously we have some other high profile women like Ariane Gorin, now CEO of Expedia. And I think all of this stuff is very, very positive for the industry. I know this was one of the things that is important for Amy as she starts to look at doing a women's summit in 2025. Um, but now we need to pivot to your other subject that you talked about, Michelle, AI, because you couldn't escape it. Now, some of it was kind of amusing. You know, Simon did a little AI of him, which was entertaining. But I do think what happened with Boom and Cher Goldboyne was pretty amazing. Do you want to discuss what you saw at a Boom? Because I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, this whole idea of a property management system that's being in some ways developed by AI tools.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the battleground. Okay. He had 5 minutes to present his product. Generally speaking, everybody picked like features of a product, right? New things, not an entire PMS in 5 minutes. And that he presented the entire PMS, did 6 minutes of questions, and took away the people's choice. It blew my mind. Like I did not vote for them only because I thought, who could grasp all of that in 5 minutes and think that that was like something they could get behind, because it was so much information. But it said a lot to what they're doing and the direction they're going. And then you look on who he's hiring. You know, he's looking at who's the best out there, who are high influencers. And, you know, I can only assume, I don't know, that his next stage is to go get the, you know, like that book, Crossing the Chasm, go get a few of those companies that people will go, like you, Steve. Boy, would he love to land you, because then you'd be out there talking about it and he'd get all these new customers. I know that you're not leaving your current PMS, but I wonder what their plan is from there. And then as far as AI goes overall, you know, when you think AI and machine learning, it means, you know, over time, this is how my brain worked, over time, it gets smarter, right? But the truth is, it's just taking averages of answers and through a lot of data and serving up what they think the most popular answer is. So, you know, like I was meeting with Roy with Send Squared, and he was talking, because he did a bunch of AI with a medical company. And so they also try to trick AI into learning things that maybe wouldn't be right when it reads medical records and stuff like that. And he shared some examples with AI in their data, and he got the AI robot to agree to deliver a keg of beer to a house. So, you know, it's a slippery slope on how much AI is going to do. Also, you know, as far as programming goes and languages go, you know, I don't know a ton about that, but in talking to two different AI professionals at DARM, both felt like any real solid programming was going to be a while before that happened. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I don't want to say I'm skeptical on some of this AI stuff, but I think I'm measured. And I did talk with the group over at Adaptive AI. They had a really good booth position, by the way, and they really were persistent. And I talked to them, and they laid out a lot of different things that they were working on. And I said, look, I get it. You know, there's a lot of exciting stuff you're doing, and there's a lot of opportunities, you know, potentially with the website, where you use machine learning to create a more dynamic experience for the customer. There's also the ability, potentially with the guest portal and even the owner portal, to again create a more dynamic experience. I said, but let's start with a little bit smaller stuff that we can really test. And so the two things I talked to them about was, one, can you prove that AI will work with email marketing? And I know, Michelle, you do this all the time. And I said, look, what to me is compelling is, can we use the AI, one, to create more dynamic content, and two, to help us with targeting and distribution, so we're not just sending the same message every week to the same customer base? Can we use machine learning to pick and choose based on previous
Searching.
history, right? When they booked, what type of properties they booked. I mean, how can we get more targeted? Because if we can get more targeted and we can truly create dynamic content with email, we can lift conversion. What do you think about AI with email?
I think that that's closer than anything is. And, the hotel industry has been doing some of this. Now, way easier, right? They were on the site, they looked at a double room, you know what I mean? Way easier than they looked at these three homes and, over these different dates and, and these filters so that you could message back. But all of that information is being collected. So it seems like, but is that really AI, Steve? Or is that data collection that is then used in a smart way?
Well, AI is just a better branding of machine learning. And I also think dynamic content or dynamic experience also is a bit of that. So,
Right.
I think it's just been rebranded AI because it's sexy, and you can get a better valuation as opposed to calling it machine learning or dynamic content. But the other thing also is PPC. That was the other thing I said to them. I said pay per click. I said it's kind of like the Wild West, how we create pay per click. It's more template based as opposed to, again, machine learning, where we learn and we could test, content subjects, how it's displayed, when it's displayed. I mean, you think about how much money we spend on pay per click, and we're spending millions a year on pay per click. And again, Michelle, you did this for a living. I mean, you consulted large customers, including hotels, how big their pay per click campaigns are. If you can, and you can clearly run A/B tests, right? I mean, you can clearly run a test where you have AI or machine learning take one set of PPC and display it, and then another where it's not, and you'll have a pretty good idea based on the control test what lifts the margin. But I mean, to me, those are the two things where I think if somebody can show that they can really move the needle, then I give them access to working with us on our website and improving conversion there.
Wouldn't that be an interesting kind of, I'm not going to call it a podcast, but like a webinar where you stacked, here's the low hanging fruit in AI. Instead of going, I'm going to go, everything is automated, start here, prove it out, then add this, then add this. But see, something you mentioned, that all of that A/B testing, even if you could do it, if you're not looking at online, offline revenue, and I know that offline revenue has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, but it's still 20 or 25% of properties business is phone reservations. Or their phone reservations, their online reservations that are supported by phone because they call, because it's complicated, important, and expensive. High consideration is what I've always called that. And, back in the day, most companies tracked online and offline revenue. Nobody's doing that anymore. And so there's a piece of the pie that you're not paying attention to. And new guests will have a higher propensity to phone than they will book online. Return guests will book online more often. So that means they need help. So I feel like right now the data is not all being considered as well.
Yeah. So again, and I think we all agree that chat, at least tier level one chat, you could probably answer a lot of questions that normally people would email with
Yep.
tier one chat on AI.
Yep.
Miriam, isn't it more fun to talk about stuff like Simon was talking about, like the movie Her, where you have literally an AI person that's customized to your needs and is like your best friend, or in that case of Her, your best girlfriend or boyfriend? And
I think I need two of them. Kind of my best girlfriend, my best boyfriend, to see how this is going to work around.
but we're going to talk, because we could talk about AI all day. Um, we also had Jason Sprinkle and Melanie Brown talk about trend, and Michelle, they were a little bit more optimistic about 2025, seemingly thinking that 2024 the market bottomed, and at least based on the data that they provided, it looked like they were showing ADR starting to tick up, occupancy and the pipeline for 2025. You had to be fairly optimistic after that presentation.
Yeah, I agreed with it. Think about the headwinds we had over the last few years. Inventory increase, demand decline, pocketbook shrinking. Now no matter there's not as much inventory, right? It's slowed down as far as what's coming on. Now people are moving inventory around from one property manager to another. But also there is no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, there is an optimism about the new president as far as financially goes. And so, real or not, people are going to feel confident they'll spend more. I agreed with their data. And, I'll tell you something else. I believe even last year where things were tighter, I know property managers in markets that killed it. And it's because they had their hands on the wheel the entire time. They looked at optimization in the areas in their business that were the biggest to affect. They didn't work on everything. They worked on the things that they knew they could affect the biggest as far as revenue streams go. And I know a client that added basically 200 units and their revenue per unit was only down about 4%. So, their market is screaming about how bad things are and they're not. So I also think it's you gotta change how you're doing your business and look at ways to optimize revenue, or like many did, Steve, you and I talked about this well over a year ago, cut costs.
Yeah, so a lot there to unpack, but a couple things. One, no question that consumer confidence is important for things like vacation rentals, which are, a disposable. So it means that you don't have to go on vacation, right? So now when people are feeling good and optimistic or not afraid, which, we can talk about the election, there was a lot of fear going on. Thank God the election ended and, that was clear who won, and we can now all move on, and people are more optimistic because we're not dealing with, some of this crazy stuff that was happening before. And so that's positive. So consumers are feeling good. They spend money when they feel good and optimistic. Energy prices have come down. We'll see if they continue to come down, but that definitely affects drive-to markets. Um, and one of the things that's also happened is interest rates are coming down. So, there's real positive momentum, not to mention stock prices are at record highs. So people feel good about their 401k plans and things like that. But Miriam, I was just up in Gatlinburg, got the chance to say hello to you and some other friends up there. It's also very optimistic up in Gatlinburg. The restaurants are full. The properties we have in Smoky Cove are actually doing better in November and December than they did in October, leaf season. The 2025 calendar is starting to fill in better than it was a year ago. You're seeing the optimism there as well.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to go back to Michelle. I think the companies that done good at the third and fourth quarter of 23 did well, not very well, did well in 2024. They planned it correctly. They stayed on top of their rates, their ADRs, all the things, the operations side. I think that's the companies. Again, they didn't come out as winners. Are going to get $365 million for backing support, but they survived 2024 a lot better than most. And I think where we have done well is not the first 2 or 3 quarters. I think V-Trips has done better the fourth quarter, what we've seen like in Smoky Cove and some of our other units, where 2025, we've piggybacked off of that, and 25 is starting to look better. Reservations are starting to come in. But again, you had to change what we were doing to perform. And I think that's what a lot of companies are doing. And look, staying on it, being proactive is where it's going to continuously and do better. As you said, reservations were coming in. We had to wait. There was a couple restaurants we wanted to go to. We couldn't get in. And it was a weekend that ideally should have been slow, right? But we saw some traction in. We weren't at 100% capacity, but we did, as the area was looking a lot better. I think that's going to piggyback into it. Election played a big toll on it. People were scared to death, regardless to who everyone voted for. Everyone was nervous. We are seeing that inflation change, that month's change. Now we're spending money. If you look at it, the NASDAQ and all the reports, people are now spending money. They don't have it realistically, some folks, but we are back to spending money and pushing the credit cards through.
Hey, so Michelle, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was this news at the conference was that Blackstone was investing in Inhabit IQ. That was pretty big news as well.
Well, big news, but at the same time, it was like finally news. Some news of any news was good news. It also, like, I'm already hearing rumors of, my mom calls it open to buy. So they're also, going to use some of that money. And, when you're growing a software company, you don't just have to grow revenue. You can also grow by acquiring other companies. And, that's another way to continue to see revenue grow. So, no surprise to me there.
And at Durham, we also saw some new people, some new people. There was a new CEO of AirDNA, and a new CEO of My Booking Pal, just to name a few of the changes. What do you think about some of the people leaving and some of the people coming into the industry?
I don't think change is always bad, and like let's start with Booking Pal because I know more about that. And the new CEO has been there probably 4 years in a contracting capacity, kind of running financials, and so he knows the business fairly well. So it made sense for him to step in as CEO. And Booking Pal has had a lot of knocks over the year. Let's call it that. They've had a lot of knocks over the years. But I feel like he is really clear on what he and the board wants to do in the future. And he's also like, he's going like, that doesn't fit with what we're going to do. And I think Alex, part of the reason they had a lot of the success early on that they did is he was an opportunist. He was an optimist. So he would like, oh yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. And then, delivering on those things, you end up with it. Because really they're a technology company for all intents and purposes. If you promise everything to everybody, you get not a great end product. So I feel good about the new CEO there. Now, as far as AirDNA goes, I don't know much about him. I was disappointed that they were not actively involved at DARM. And I think that was a mistake. And it makes me wonder, was that old guard that made that decision? Was new guard going, we need to be involved here? Because this is a data and revenue management company. They're a data company that feeds revenue managers decisions. They should have been there. So hopefully the new CEO will see next year that that's a significant value. And they were one of the major players not at the table.
Yeah, so it's interesting. That was certainly another one that people were kind of talking about. And of course, everyone was complimenting Amy on Will Guidara returning, best-selling author and of Unreasonable Hospitality. Did another great talk, had a book signing. There was an incredible fireworks show at the end of Darm that was on the beach, pretty amazing. And then the food, there was just amazing food, crab cakes and shrimp and all kinds of amazing food. So I saw a couple people from VRMA at the event, and I hope they were taking notes of how to run an event and, more importantly, some of the food, because the food at Phoenix was unedible. They had this turkey. I'm not sure if it actually was real turkey or some weird meat that they called turkey, but it was unedible. Any rate, Michelle, I know that Amy also announced that there's going to be a women's summit next year, and we're going to have Miriam attend. So that'll be great. And what do you think about next year? Is it going to be a women's summit followed by DARM? Is that going to be the format?
I'm not positive. It kind of sounds like it won't be. It's like I heard there's even rumors of Sedona for the women's conference. So like, I mean, like I would love that. It probably we'd have a capacity on it because there's not huge meeting space there. But But the Durham conference, there has been talk about having it at the same location, because our thought was like we fit perfectly there, and everything's close, and the suppliers are close, and all that stuff. But Steve, you mentioned the like the things that I think are important at a conference, really important, the details. But the other thing is that there were 7 tracks of competing. At every track you were like, ooh, which one do I go to? And I had someone say to me, what's the IQ level here? This has got to be some of the smartest people in our industry. Now, I'm not saying if you weren't there, you weren't smart. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there were a lot of people there that were thinking strategically about data and revenue management. And, they had she had 2 revenue management tracks, like a beginning and an advance. There was a technology and AI, as you mentioned. There was a distribution and marketing track that we had experts from Google come in. The industry roundtables were done really uniquely, and had some of the smartest people on each panel. And all property managers, really, really, really good content. And, what I heard was this conference is highly concentrated content, like the best they've ever had, and that they'll never miss a darn. The criticism I got was that the sessions were only 35 minutes, and people were like, either there needs to be an A and a B, or it needs to be 45 minutes. So, that was, something probably that we should look at. But most conferences are 2 or 3 property managers for every sponsor. This was 15 to every sponsor attendee. So, I mean, it was rich, concentrated content and overall experience, I thought.
So Miriam, what do you think of Sedona in 2025 for a women's summit?
I'm very excited. I mean, look, I had a good time in Nashville because I love Nashville, but I think Sedona's going to be great. So I'm very excited.
All right. Well, we're going to end this episode. This will be the last one of the season. Thank you both for making it. Thank you, Heather. And go to our website, Straightfire VR, for previous episodes. Thank you.
To watch previous episodes of Straightfire VR, go to www.straightfirevr.com. For questions and comments, you can reach us at straightfirevr@gmail.com.